In the heart of London's East End, the gaslit streets of Whitechapel were shrouded in darkness, echoing with the footsteps of weary souls. Poverty-stricken and overcrowded, this district was a melting pot of different cultures, but it wasn't the dimly lit alleyways or the wretched living conditions that struck terror into the hearts of residents. It was the elusive and malevolent presence of Jack the Ripper, a name whispered in fear by all. The year was 1888, and as summer turned to autumn, a series of gruesome murders rocked the area. Women, struggling to survive in the unforgiving streets, were the targets of this mysterious and brutal killer. Mary Ann Nichols was the first victim, her life extinguished in the most horrifying manner, her body bearing the hallmarks of a grotesque ritual. As the news of the murder spread like wildfire, panic gripped the entire city of London. The police worked tirelessly, but their investigation was fraught with challenges. Forensic science was a fledgling concept, and the killer left behind scant traces, shrouding his identity in darkness. In the small, smoke-filled rooms of Scotland Yard, detectives feverishly sifted through clues and suspects. From impoverished butchers to disgruntled nobles, no stone was left unturned in their quest to unmask the shadowed killer. Meanwhile, the gaslit streets remained ablaze with fear. Prostitutes, the most vulnerable members of society, were living in constant terror, knowing they could be the next target. Women began to avoid the streets after dark, and the city's atmosphere grew ever more tense. In the midst of this terror, letters began arriving, dripping with blood-red ink, claiming to be from Jack the Ripper himself. The media couldn't resist the allure of sensationalism, and soon, the entire world knew of the monster who roamed the streets of Whitechapel. These letters added a macabre layer to an already horrifying tale, taunting the police and tormenting the public. As the leaves turned from green to gold, more victims fell prey to the shadowed killer. Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, their lives snuffed out in quick succession, each crime scene bearing the grisly trademarks of Jack the Ripper. As autumn drew to a close, the chill in the air intensified, mirroring the growing unease. The police were overwhelmed, and the public clamored for answers. But in the gaslit streets of Whitechapel, Jack the Ripper remained elusive. The City of London was in the grip of terror, and the hunt for Jack the Ripper was in full swing. Detectives painstakingly examined every piece of evidence, meticulously following every lead. The walls of Scotland Yard were adorned with maps, crime scene photographs, and suspect profiles as the investigators tried to connect the dots. Amidst the panic and chaos, the public became increasingly suspicious of anyone who appeared even remotely suspicious. Fear and paranoia spread like wildfire, and innocent individuals found themselves under scrutiny. But with each passing day, Jack the Ripper seemed to evade capture, leaving behind a trail of fear and blood. The media frenzy surrounding the case reached a fever pitch, with newspapers competing to publish the most sensational headlines. Speculation ran rampant, and the public's imagination conjured up countless theories about the identity of the shadowed killer. In the smoke-filled rooms of Scotland Yard, detectives worked around the clock, questioning witnesses, chasing down leads, and tirelessly poring over the case files. The streets of Whitechapel became a labyrinth of secrets and potential suspects, but every breakthrough seemed to lead to a dead end. From impoverished butchers with a penchant for violence to disgruntled individuals seeking revenge, a myriad of suspects emerged. Each had their own reasons for falling under suspicion, but the evidence was often inconclusive, leaving the detectives frustrated and the public anxious. As the investigation stretched on, the pressure on the police intensified. The world was watching, and the failure to catch Jack the Ripper weighed heavily on the shoulders of those tasked with protecting the city. Rewards were offered, and the city's leaders pleaded with the public to come forward with any information that could lead to the apprehension of the killer. But despite the best efforts of the police, Jack the Ripper continued to elude capture, leaving a trail of fear and devastation in his wake. As winter settled over the gaslit streets of Whitechapel, the city remained gripped by terror, unsure of when or where the shadowed killer would strike next. As the investigation into Jack the Ripper's identity continued, the chilling letters allegedly penned by the killer began to arrive. Each letter was more taunting and sinister than the last, claiming responsibility for the murders and detailing the gruesome acts committed upon the victims. The letters were addressed to the media and authorities, and they bore the ominous signature, Jack the Ripper. The contents were disturbing, revealing intimate knowledge of the crimes that had not been disclosed to the public. This led many to believe that the letters were indeed from the hand of the elusive killer himself. The media eagerly published the letters, and they quickly became the subject of morbid fascination for the public. Copycat letters also began to appear, further muddying the waters and making it even more challenging for investigators to discern which ones were genuinely from the killer. The letters seemed to mock the police's efforts, taunting them for their inability to catch Jack the Ripper. They played on the public's fears, causing panic and hysteria to spread like wildfire throughout London. The shadow of the Ripper loomed large over the gaslit streets, and the terror in Whitechapel only intensified. Despite their disturbing content, the letters provided little concrete evidence to identify the author. Handwriting analysis at the time was rudimentary, and the letters themselves were stained with blood and smudged ink, making it challenging to definitively match them to any individual. As the investigation progressed, the police received numerous tips and information from the public. Yet, amidst the flood of leads, few offered any real breakthroughs. Theories about the killer's identity continued to proliferate, ranging from plausible to outright ludicrous. One theory that gained traction was the possibility of Jack the Ripper being a medical professional due to the precision with which the victims were mutilated. This line of thinking seemed plausible, considering the anatomical knowledge required to perform such gruesome acts. Another theory suggested that Jack the Ripper had a royal connection. Some speculated that the authorities were covering up the true identity of the killer to protect the monarchy from scandal. While this theory captured the imagination of the public, concrete evidence to support it was lacking. Despite the diverse array of suspects and theories, the police were no closer to catching the shadowed killer. The gaslit streets of Whitechapel remained shrouded in darkness, and the public's fear and frustration continued to mount. As the letters from Jack the Ripper ceased, so did the killings. The murderer seemed to vanish into the night, leaving behind a city forever changed by fear and paranoia. The investigation into Jack the Ripper's identity may have slowed, but the haunting enigma of the shadowed killer would never truly fade from history. As the years passed, the memory of Jack the Ripper's reign of terror began to fade, but the mystery of his identity persisted. The gaslit streets of Whitechapel were no more, replaced by a rapidly changing city and the march of time. Yet, the enigma of the shadowed killer continued to captivate the imaginations of historians, true crime enthusiasts, and armchair detectives. In the 20th century, advancements in forensic science breathed new life into the investigation. With modern techniques at their disposal, researchers and investigators re-examined the evidence, hoping to shed light on a case that had remained unsolved for over a century. DNA analysis and profiling emerged as powerful tools in the fight to unmask Jack the Ripper. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, scientists attempted to extract DNA from letters and crime scene evidence attributed to the killer. The hope was that a breakthrough in DNA analysis could finally lead to the identity of the shadowed killer. However, despite the best efforts of modern forensic science, conclusive results remained elusive. The letters from Jack the Ripper had been handled by numerous individuals over the years, making the extraction of uncontaminated DNA a significant challenge. Moreover, many of the crime scene artifacts had long since degraded or been lost, further complicating the analysis. As the scientific community continued to grapple with the case, armchair detectives and amateur sleuths contributed their theories and findings to the ever-growing lore surrounding Jack the Ripper. Books, documentaries, and online forums buzzed with speculation and analysis, each person hoping to be the one to crack the case wide open.